All right, let's get right into it. For more than 100 years, biologists have been wrestling with a really deep question. Why would any creature, really, sacrifice itself for the good of the group? Today, we're going to unpack a pretty radical new answer to a question that even Charles Darwin himself couldn't quite wrap his head around. And yeah, this is the central problem, right? Natural selection, we all know the phrase, survival of the fittest. It's all about you, the individual, passing on your genes. So how in the world does self-sacrifice or altruism ever manage to evolve? It's like trying to win a race by stopping to help everyone else. It just feels like it should be an evolutionary dead end.
And believe me, Darwin knew this was a big deal. He looked at these colonies of ants and bees. He saw these worker insects that are sterile. They literally dedicate their entire lives to raising someone else's kids, the queens, without ever getting a chance to have their own. He called it a special difficulty, basically a major headache for his entire theory of evolution.
What he was staring at is something we now call eusociality. And it's pretty much the highest level of social life you can get. These creatures form what we call superorganisms. They act less like a bunch of individuals and more like a single body, a single being. And that idea just completely flies in the face of individual competition.
And yet, here they are. And they're not just existing, they are insanely successful. Think about this. The sheer weight, the biomass of ants alone, is more than half of all insects on the planet. That's just staggering. So this isn't some weird little biological quirk. No, this is one of the most dominant, most powerful strategies life has ever come up with. The real question becomes not just how does it happen, but why is it so darn good?
So for a really long time, for decades actually, we thought we had it all figured out. There was this elegant, really powerful idea called kin selection. And boy, did it seem to solve Darwin's big problem perfectly. At the heart of it is this idea of inclusive fitness. And it's pretty simple, really. It just expands what we mean by evolutionary success. It says it's not just about your own kids, it's about your whole genetic legacy. So if you help your sister or your cousin have kids, you're still helping copies of your own genes get into the next generation. It's a different way to win the game. And they even managed to boil this whole thing down to a neat little mathematical formula, Hamilton's rule. The best way to think about it is like a cost-benefit analysis for your genes. An act of self-sacrifice makes evolutionary sense only if the benefit to your relative, adjusted for how closely related you are, is bigger than the cost to you. That little r for relatedness is the key. It has to be high enough to make the sacrifice pay off, genetically speaking. So everything hinges on that r value. How related are you? You share about half your genes with your sister, right? But only about an eighth with a first cousin. Now here's where things got really interesting. Scientists discovered this weird genetic quirk in insects like ants and bees called haplodiploidy. The upshot is incredible. Sisters in these species can share a whopping 3/4 of their genes. They're super sisters. Think about that. They're actually more related to each other than they would be to their own daughters. And bam, this was the haplodiploid hypothesis. It was hailed as the absolute smoking gun for kin selection. It all clicked into place. Why have your own kids when you can help your mom produce a bunch of super sisters passing on even more of your genes? It was such a perfect, beautiful explanation that it went straight into the textbooks. Case closed, or so we thought. But here's the thing about science. No matter how beautiful a theory is, it has to stand up to the evidence. And as we moved into the later part of the 20th century, researchers started finding things that just didn't fit. The foundation of kin selection started to show some serious cracks. Yeah, that smoking gun, it went completely cold. For years, that link between the weird genetics and social behavior seemed unbreakable. But then, scientists started discovering all these other highly social species. You've got termites, snapping shrimp, even naked mole rats. And guess what? They all have totally standard, normal genetics. Suddenly, that perfect, clean correlation, it just evaporated. And the problems just kept mounting. We found tons of super social species without that special genetic system. Then we looked at it the other way. There are tens of thousands of species with that system that are totally lone wolves, completely solitary. And the real kicker? Some colonies actually seem to go out of their way to avoid being too closely related, probably to build up resistance to diseases. That directly contradicts the whole idea. So all of this led the authors of the paper we're looking at today to a pretty brutal conclusion. They basically say, look, kin selection theory might sound nice on paper, but it hasn't actually helped us understand what's happening in the real world. Research on social insects was booming, but it wasn't because of this theory. It was almost in spite of it. Okay, so if kin selection is out, then what's in? What's the real story? Well, this paper lays out a totally different path. It's a straightforward, step-by-step recipe that doesn't need any special rules. It just uses good old-fashioned, standard natural selection. All right, so here's how they say it happens. Step 1, individuals just happen to form groups. Step 2, the group already has some useful traits, like say they're good at building a nest that's easy to defend. Step 3, and this is the big one, a mutation pops up, a simple gene that tells the kids, hey, don't leave home, just stay here. Once you have a bunch of related individuals stuck in a defensible nest, new traits can emerge at the colony level, and at that point, natural selection starts acting on the whole colony. The best colonies, the most cooperative ones, beat the other colonies. That's what drives the evolution of the superorganism. And this brings us to the single biggest takeaway, the idea that completely flips the old theory on its head. In this new model, being closely related isn't the special ingredient that causes social behavior to happen. Nope, it's just what happens after it starts. Of course you're going to be closely related if everyone is staying home with mom. Relatedness is the consequence, not the cause. So what does this all boil down to? It's really a massive shift in perspective. It's about changing who you're looking at. Instead of focusing on the individual worker, we're zooming out and looking at the queen, at the colony as a whole. Let's put them side by side. The old view, kin selection, is all about the worker. It asks, why is this worker making the choice to help? But this new view is all about the queen. It asks, what genetic traits does the queen have that create a winning colony? See the difference? The workers aren't seen as independent agents anymore. They're more like extensions of the queen's own body, all working to pass on her genes. And so the final verdict from these authors is pretty blunt. Inclusive fitness theory, it was a detour. A clever one, for sure, but ultimately an unnecessary one. They're arguing that standard, plain vanilla natural selection was always powerful enough to explain this amazing phenomenon. We didn't need a special theory after all. And that leaves us with one last really big idea to chew on. The paper points out that you could, in a way, describe humans as being loosely eusocial. We have complex societies, we cooperate, we divide labor. So if this new theory is the right way to think about it, if the recipe is just getting groups together in a defensible home and then letting group-level competition run its course, what does that imply about our own evolution? What does that say about the forces that shaped human society? That's definitely something to think about.